What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with some more Detroit Lions free agency news, man. We have another update. Another re-signing was announced for the Detroit Lions, and we have a little bit of a rumor, I guess, as well. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with some Lions news, another Lions free agency update, man. This has been a fun week. It's been kind of chill, you know, just going through updating Lions news. And today we have another move for the Lions. And I think this video was super important for me, at least personally, because it's very easy at this position to kind of start putting different guys together, and you're thinking of one guy and you're like, this was him, but then it's like, that wasn't him. And that's because we've had a lot of players come through this positional group for the Lions over the last few years, and that is the kicker position. Detroit Lions reportedly are re-signing kicker Michael Badgley. Now, we don't know the details on this contract. I would assume it's a one-year deal. I would assume it's not super expensive. Usually kickers' contracts aren't that expensive, but I would assume it is a one-year deal, but we'll see. We just know that he has been re-signed by the Lions. Now, quick note to this. We know that the Lions are very open to adding competition to this positional group. We've seen that. So that is something to throw out there. Also, on top of it, I don't hate this because I still think the door is open to even potentially draft a kicker. But if you go into the draft without a kicker and then some team surprise you and drafts one, and they're like, oh, we don't have a kicker. They drafted the guy that we liked. Now you could be in a very difficult position. And we know kickers are not easy to find, but for the Lions, we've had a lot of kickers in the building recently, and I think it's very unfortunate, but it's also a difficult thing because a kicker has one bad day. He goes 1 for 3, and all of a sudden the next day you're thinking, should this guy get cut? He misses that big field goal for you. He has a rough extra point outing, and all of a sudden it's like, do we got to find a new kicker? And that's what it's been for the Lions. We haven't had exact consistency there. I thought we found it with Seibert. They brought him back, and then he came out early in the year, struggled a little bit, had a rough game against the Vikings, and the Lions were like, we're moving forward. We went through a lot of different kickers, but in fairness to Michael Badgley, who the Detroit Lions re-signed today, I have to put the numbers on the screen from this past season because I think it helps me remember that all those bad moments were not Michael Badgley. Actually, Badgley had a pretty good season when you look at it statistically for the Lions. He played in 12 games. He was coming from Chicago where he was 4 for 4. Came to Detroit, went 20 of 24, made every extra point, which is a big part of it. Only 5 kickoffs, as you can see. You can see his stats by yardage. 2 for 3 on 50-plus yard kicks. He made a 51-yarder against Buffalo. He made a 53-yarder against Dallas. And that is one question about Michael Badgley is the length that he can get on his kicks. We saw it against the Jets. He had a 54-yard field goal attempt. He missed it short. There's always been that question of what is his leg power. I mean, his first season, he had a 59-yard field goal, but that is the longest that he's had. And for the Lions, there was definitely some questions about how far could he actually kick it. But some of those bad memories that you may have, whether that be against the Minnesota Vikings, where we lost that game 24-28, Lions decided to try to take a field goal. We missed the field goal. That game was not Michael Badgley. That was Austin Seibert, who went 1 for 3 in that game. Or you have the game against Buffalo, where we were really struggling to make extra points. That was not Michael Badgley. That was Eberle, who was having a rough day. And that's difficult. It's a tough position, right? We saw that Santoso a year ago against Pittsburgh. He had a really rough game. We tied the game. Next day, it's like, we're looking for a new kicker. So it's a difficult position, but I love it because at least we'll have competition this offseason. I pretty much bet that the Lions are going to add someone else, whether that be free agency when the time the season comes around, a UDFA, even maybe a draft pick. But to have competition is great for this positional group, and the Lions have loved to do that. But it also kind of gives you a safety blanket at very least, where it's like, okay, if someone that we else try to bring in, if he's not good or if we don't get the guy that we want, at least we have a kicker. And Badgley was credited by Dave Phipp, who is our special teams coach, for being very consistent. He's like, he kicks the ball the same every time. He knows who he is. And even when you look at his career stats, about an 82% field goal kicker in his career, it's not terrible. He's only 5 for 13 on 50 plus. And again, what we saw is this past year, he was 2 for 3. So he actually had one of his best seasons. 36 for 47 from 40 to 49 yards. That's pretty good as well. Like, Michael Badgley had a really solid season for the Lions this past year, but you could see all the misses that I put there at the bottom. Buffalo was just kind of like a, what the heck was that, right? We had very short field, 29-yard field goal, and he missed it. And yeah, it would have been great if you would have made that. But to his credit, he did bounce back. It didn't stick with him. It's not like we couldn't kick the ball again. He went back out there, tied the game up. Now, we ended up not going to overtime because we gave up a field goal right before the end of the game. But he did tie the game up. He bounced back and hit a clutch kick for us. So give him credit for that. Again, the miss against Green Bay, the miss against the Jets, which was 54 yards. And then he also had the miss against the Vikings, which was just bad timing because it was kind of deflating. We had a really nice drive before half. He goes out there and misses it. But those were the only 4 misses that he had. Statistically speaking, he was pretty good for the Lions. You just wonder about the leg power and how much potential does he give you? How confident are you when you hit the 40, you can hit the 40-yard line that you could put him out there for a shot? At this point in time, you probably wouldn't be very comfortable at that. Like, you kind of really have to get beyond the 35-yard line. So I think the Lions will take a shot on somebody, whether it's draft, UDFA, someone that has a bigger leg, but at the same time, it's probably just going to end up being a competition between him and Badgley. He's only 27 years old. He said that he wanted to be back in Detroit, and now here he is once again. So credit to Badgley. I had to bring up the numbers here because I know for me personally, I've probably thought of him as maybe the guy in certain moments that missed a certain kick, but in reality, we've had a lot of kickers, so sometimes they get kind of strung together as fans, but these are statistics on the past season, and they're pretty good. Now, the rumor that we have comes from Dave Burkett, and this is not me, this is from Dave Burkett that put this tweet out. He said this: "Nothing official by any means yet, but with a slow developing wide receiver market, it does sound like DJ Chark and the Lions could be a thing again in 2023. So I don't know if that's just because he's saying, well, Lions haven't signed anybody at receiver and there hasn't been a lot of movement, so maybe they'll want him back, because I think there's a scenario where the Lions don't even bring in another receiver here. They go in the draft. They draft maybe a mid-round receiver with developmental outside receiver for that 2 position. They have Josh Reynolds. They got Jameson, who they trade up for. St. Brown's going to man the slot, and Khalif Raymond gives you depth. So you draft someone and you roll with that. Because like I've said, the Detroit Lions last year were fine with coming in with knowing Jameson probably wouldn't play. So having their 1 speedster and DJ Chark, having Josh as a 2 and St. Brown as a slot. They were cool with that. And you can win with that. But when DJ Chark was out there, the Lions did average 30 points a game. I would love to bring back DJ Chark. I know I'm kind of alone on this. I've said it, though. I would give him a multi-year deal. I understand the injuries. I'd be willing to. We'll see if something happens. But if the Lions do pull off bringing back DJ Chark, at that point, when you hit this draft, there's really not a lot of glaring holes. There's not a lot of starters that are needed at that point in time. You're going to have a lot of flexibility in the draft. You may not even have to draft receiver at that point in time. You could, but you may not have to because you also still have Cephas. But the point is the Lions would have so much flexibility in the draft. The only pure need starter to me would be defensive tackle. But then outside of that, you can get guys to compete for starting positions and you can get depth. I do want to update you guys some details in terms of how the Lions set up some contracts here, because we do have the details to Alex Anzalone's contract and re-signing with the Detroit Lions for 3 years, $18.75 million, and kind of just give you a quick little idea of maybe where the Lions salary cap space is based on what we know so far, to add to kind of the DJ Chark point that I'm going to make. Now, this is not the re-signing. If you're like, well, that thing's cheap, that's not what this is. This is actually Derek Barnes, but I'm showing you this because Derek Barnes has 2 years left under his rookie deal with the Lions. Malcolm Rodriguez would have 3 years left on his rookie deal with the Detroit Lions. Neither of them have 6-year options. I'm showing you that because Duracell, Alex Anzalone, his deal was set up very similarly to a lot of the other ones, meaning that the Detroit Lions backloaded the deal. His cap number is very low this season, and then they gave themselves an out on the back end. But for him, for the next 2 years, he's basically locked in with the Lions. And I think a big part of that probably is also the fact that Derek Barnes and Malcolm Rodriguez are both still going to be on their rookie deals for the next 2 seasons. So you're not paying those 2 guys, and I anticipate they'll probably both be here, right? That's looking out, but I'm anticipating they're both going to be here. So they're not going to be paying either of those linebackers. Brad Holmes called it a strength at the end of the season. So the guy that they are going to be paying is going to be Alex Anzalone. Now, they won't be paying him a ton this year. Only a $2.5 million cap hit, which is just a $250K raise in terms of his cap hit from last season. So it's very similar. The difference is, though, it gets higher the next year in 2024 because, again, the Lions backloaded the deal. You can see his cap number jumped to $7.3 million. They also tried to spread it out a little bit because with the $4.8 million prorated bonus, they threw a void year on his deal. So what this does is basically he's kind of locked into the Lions for the next 2 years, because if you cut him this year, it makes no sense. Or even next year, you're not really going to save anything. You're just $6.6 million in dead cap. But it's heading into that 2025 season where if the Lions cut him, the bonuses would be gone, the guaranteed salary would be gone, and then you're just taking a look at the void year plus the prorated bonus, which would accelerate, which would give you $2.4 million in dead cap if he was cut heading into the 2025 season, and you would save almost $5 million. So basically your out is 2 years in, which would also be at the same time that Derek Barnes would then become an unrestricted free agent. And also Malcolm Rodriguez would still be under contract, but Derek Barnes would become an unrestricted free agent. So that's how the Lions decided to set up Alex Anzalone's contract, which basically means he's kind of locked into the next 2 seasons. It's then that 3rd year where the Lions could potentially look for an out. obviously resigning, all those things can happen at that time, to $2.5 million. And again, like we saw after 2024, a lot of guys are no longer under contract for the Lions, but the linebacker position is going to have, they should have 3 guys under contract for next year: Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, and Mark Rodriguez. Looking at the Lions' entire salary cap, what we don't know is we don't know Graham Glasgow's details. Again, it was reported 1 year, $4.5 million. There could be a void year on that. The cap hit could be much lower than $4.5 million. And we also don't know Emmanuel Mosley's details either, who was reported a 1 year, $6 million deal. Again, I'm assuming neither of those cap hits are actually that number. Based on not knowing that, and now we know with Alex Anzalone, what the Lions are looking at right now, as you can see, $18.3 million in cap space. We did kind of the numbers on the rookie class because you'd have to replace the top 51. So what was it, like $7.5 million is kind of what we came to. So let's just say $7.5, $8 million. If you take that off of this number, you're looking at what, $10, $11 million in cap space. That's kind of where I'm projecting the Lions feel like maybe they have, is about $10 to $11 million. Obviously, you're going to still want to have more than that left over. So if a guy like DJ Chark was to resign, I would anticipate that his cap number for this season would probably be, if the Lions were going to try to re-sign a guy like DJ Chark, either one, they would have to really try to lower his cap number for this upcoming season. Obviously, you have about $6 million in dead cap for him right now. So you'd have to either really try to lower his cap number on a re-signing, or you would have to take a look at the Mosleys and the Graham Glasgows, maybe even the Michael Badgley, probably a little bit less of the Badgley, but those guys, and probably add void years to their deal to lower their cap numbers, because one is set for $6 million, the other one's $4.5 million. If that's your cap hit, that's going to be way too high to re-sign than DJ Chark on top of that. So they would have to either lower those cap numbers by adding void years, or they would have to, with DJ Chark, really lower his cap hit. In that scenario, that is a situation where the Lions could consider cutting a player, whether that's the Big V's or the Romeos or something along those lines. Also, of course, you could always restructure someone's contract as well. We've already done with Charles, Tracy, maybe a guy like Frank. You could also look to restructure a deal, or maybe a guy like Josh Reynolds, but I don't think that makes sense. I'm just bringing it up. I just don't think it makes sense, but you could cut a guy like that, I guess. There's also been continued buzz on the Lions being interested potentially in signing a backup quarterback. I thought they would, because even if you draft someone, you're probably not going to want him to step in if you needed him to, or especially if you're looking at a guy like Hooker who may not be healthy immediately, you're going to have a backup quarterback as well. Not to say that would be super expensive, depending on who you bring in. The market's been kind of flying off. Minshew's, Rush, these guys are getting signed. But a guy like Bridgewater, you still would have to account for a cap hit like that if you were also trying to sign a backup quarterback. So bring back DJ, I don't think it would be as simple as just saying we're going to re-sign him. Some other moves would have to follow, or those cap numbers would really have to be lowered for Graham and also Emmanuel. Right, looking at a little bit of money to spend, but that's kind of where we're at right now. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pat, for watching, and I'm out.